galw'r aelodau i drefn, a hoffwn groesawu aelod newydd y prynawn yma, Helen Mary Jones, fel yr aelod yn cynrychioli rhanbarth y canolbarth ar Gorllewin. Edrych ymlaen yn fawr at eich cyfraniadau Helen Mary Jones yn y siambr yma a thu hwnt, a dwi'n galw arnoch chi i wneud datganiad cynnar i ni yn y cynulliad. Helen Mary Jones.
Diolch yn fawr, Llywydd. It goes without saying that nobody would wish to find themselves returned to this chamber under the circumstances that I face. And I have to say that it was a difficult decision to make to return. I want to express my gratitude this afternoon to Swansea University for releasing me from my commitments to them early to enable me to be here today. And I want to thank all of those who have supported me through the transition, to the staff of the Plaid Cymru group and my fellow Plaid members. I want to say a particular thank you to some of the Assembly staff. I want to mention Jodie Franklin, who was the best buddy in the world in terms of getting me through all the processes, and the amazing Anne-Marie Frey, who has the unenviable job of trying to get me sorted out with my IT. Once the decision to return had been made, it felt like the right thing to do. And I would not want to leave this chamber with the impression that I am taking on this role with any sense of reluctance. On the contrary, I am looking forward to serving my constituents in Mid and West Wales, working for them, advocating for them on the broad range of issues that are of concern to them in this challenging time. And I'm looking forward to holding the government to account on their behalf and on the behalf of the people of Wales. Llywydd, I am aware that times have changed since I last stood in this chamber. My values have not. At the heart of what I will do will continue to be my commitment to the struggle for social justice, particularly for the rights of children and the liberation of women and girls.
Mae'n bleser gen I hefyd gyhoeddi'n unol ar rheol sefydlog 26.75 fod deddf iechyd y cyhoedd i safbris am alcohol Cymru 2018 wedi cael cydsyniad brenhinol ar y 9 Awst 2018. A dyma ni felly yn dod i'r eitem gyntaf ar yr agenda, sef y cwestiynau'r prif weinidog, ac mae'r cwestiwn cyntaf heddi gan Joyce Watson.
Diolch, Llywydd. What assessment has the Welsh Government made of the rollout of universal credit in Wales?
Well, I remain deeply concerned about the fundamental flaws of universal credit. I'm disappointed that the UK Government is persisting with its rollout, and the National Audit Office's findings on universal credit highlight many issues that we have also repeatedly raised with the UK Government.
Thank you for that. I arranged a poverty roundtable during the summer in Carmarthenshire, and there were representatives at that roundtable from the Trustwell Trust. They told me that demand for food parcels has increased by 52%. Where universal credit has been rolled out, there has been a 13% increase in Carmarthenshire in the past year alone. We all know that 1 in 4 claimants fall into debt because they haven't received their first payment on time, and that 4 in 10 claimants are struggling to pay council tax and rent and bills. And Disability Rights UK has said, given the dire state of the universal credit system, we find it beyond belief that a responsible government would intend to carry on migrating people into a system that clearly doesn't work. Given all of that, and I'm sure that you agree with most of it, in the meantime, what is the government, this government, doing to support my constituents who are already in receipt of universal credit and those who are to find themselves in that position very shortly?
Well, we remain committed to ensuring that the most vulnerable people in our society have access to free and independent advice on social welfare law issues, including debt, welfare and money management. Through our financial inclusion work, we provide around £6 million a year, which is used to fund projects that deliver advice services within all 22 local authority areas. We know that funding is making a difference to people's lives. During last year, in other words, between April 2017 and March 2018, the funding supported over 73,000 people, helping them to access over £53 million of welfare benefit income for people supported. I know that universal credit advice events have taken place across several areas around Wales.
Mark Isherwood.
As you might be aware, the DWP has recruited community partner teams from people with lived experience of disability from external bodies, primarily third sector bodies, on a 12-month project to shape the support for disabled people and people with health conditions. And last Friday at the Assembly Cross-Party Autism Group meeting held in Wrexham, there was a presentation from the DWP Community Partnership Team for North and Mid Wales. Again, not civil servants. These are people who work in the disability sector, some of whom are disabled themselves. And they told us that they are providing advice and training to job coaches in job centres to enable a better understanding and support, but it's only a 12-month project, 2018 to 2019. What, if any, involvement or oversight has the Welsh Government in this programme? And will you join the cross-party autism group in considering a call for that 12-month programme to be extended?
Well, it's not clear whether that programme is one that we have funded directly through local authorities, but the member will have heard the answer I gave earlier. I can say that around £3 million per annum of debt advice funding currently administered by the Money Advice Service via the financial levy will be devolved to Welsh Government when the single financial guidance body will be set up. We expect that to happen in January of next year, and that, of course, will assist us in making sure that we have the right level of support in place.
Bethan Syed.
In July, the Housing and Regeneration Minister wrote to the UK Government expressing concerns with universal credit, and the Minister in that letter called for example, greater support for those less digitally literate. I would say that that's something that could have been done easy if you had passed the financial inclusion bill that I had put forward. Other concerns were raised, such as being consistent with alternative payment arrangements. These are fundamentally administration changes which this government could do for those vulnerable people if you chose to do so. So why do you, time and time again, refuse to take responsibility for wanting those administration charges to be brought upon the Welsh Government when you could be helping the most vulnerable in our society? Surely we should take anything you say on universal credit with a pinch of salt.
But at a cost. Because with administration there always comes a cost, and the costs are usually significant. I would rather see the issue dealt with in this way, to see those, instead of costs going on administration, those costs being given, that money being given to universal credit claimants. And secondly, of course, to see a Labour government elected in London who will rectify the situation properly.
So we're in the mean.
Question 2, Julie Morgan.
Has the First Minister had with the UK Government about the future of regional policy in Wales?
Well, we take every opportunity to discuss with the UK Government the interests of Wales, including our devolved responsibility over regional policy. And, of course, it will be important that whatever happens in the future respects devolution.
I thank the First Minister for that response, and I'm sure the First Minister would agree that European structural funds have been hugely beneficial to Wales, both in helping individuals, helping communities, supporting infrastructure projects, creating jobs and developing partnership working. Does he have any knowledge about how the UK Government plans to operate the Shared Prosperity Fund in the future?
Well, there's been some discussion between officials, but the detail is scant. Our position remains clear that economic policy is a devolved responsibility in Wales. We should be given the replacement funding we were promised 2 years ago. Wales would not lose out in lose a penny of funding. The reality is the UK Government has very limited powers to directly fund and deliver regional economic development in Wales in any event without further legislation that will drive a coach and horses, of course, through the devolution settlement that people have voted for on 2 occasions. Now, we, of course, will continue to develop our own policy in terms of developing our economy, but it's absolutely crucial that there's no attempt at a power grab if the Shared Prosperity Fund fails to respect devolution.
Nick Ramsey.
Diolch Lawrence. First Minister, I fully appreciate that the Welsh Government is still awaiting details, the finalised details of the Shared Prosperity Fund, and it's vitally important that within Wales we do have an effective replacement to the structural funds which we have benefited from, depended upon for a very long time. Albeit we're in the situation we are, Can you give us that assurance that your officials are doing their best at this moment in time to develop at least a framework going forward, so that when we do have full details of that shared prosperity fund, the people of Wales, industry within Wales, is best placed on the best footing to make the most advantage of it and get on with the job for Wales?
Well, the difficulty is, of course, the lack of detail as to how the fund will operate, how much money there will be in the fund, for example, whether it will be a fund where there will be a bidding process, which of course will cut across devolution, whether it will operate in the same way as the current European funds operate. In the absence of that detail, of course, it's difficult to put forward proposals as to how that fund might operate in Wales. But I can say that the Finance Secretary is scheduled to deliver an oral statement next month, which will set out next steps for the development with stakeholders of a regional policy post-Brexit.
Mary Jones.
Thank you, Chloe. First Minister, I appreciate it may be rather difficult to be negotiating with the Brexit process as it stands. Would you agree with me that you could, of course, have strengthened your own hand by rejecting and refusing to accept what you've described as a power grab? And have you any idea, and I fully accept that this is not within your gift, of the time frame by which we will know more about the Shared Prosperity Fund and the extent to which your government will be able to deliver it in Wales?
Well, I can't give a timescale on the Shared Prosperity Fund because it's not our timescale, not our fund. In terms of the situation, I should welcome, of course, back to the Assembly as well. Forgive me for that. In terms of what the members described, well, the Scottish Government now finds itself in court. We don't know what the outcome of that will be, but of course, if the Supreme Court rules against the Scottish Government, that opens up any number of difficult avenues as far as devolution is concerned. We took the decision that we did on the basis that we felt it was a good agreement for Wales. Not everything we would have wanted, of course. That's the nature of an agreement. The Scottish Government at the moment, well, is it in a more powerful position? I'd argue not, because, of course, it's fighting its case in court.
Cwestiynau nawr gan arweinwyr y pleidiau. Arweinydd yr wrthblaid, Paul Davies.
First Minister, can you tell us why you vetoed some of the proposed recent changes to the operational protocol recommended by Paul Bowen into the independent QC inquiry into the events surrounding Carl Sargent's death?
Well, could I welcome the member to his position as Leader of the Opposition? He's asked me questions before, of course, and now, of course, he is officially in place, and no doubt we will tussle in this chamber over the next few months. The answer to his question is I haven't vetoed anything.
Well, let me remind the First Minister what he said in his statement last week. You've made it clear in your statement that these proposals were significant and that you agreed with the majority, which means you did not agree with all. In that case, and in the interests of openness and transparency, can you tell us what you didn't agree with, and will you now publish all these proposals, including the ones that you rejected?
Well, that's a matter for the investigator, not for me. There are two issues particularly that have been mentioned. One is cross-examination of witnesses. That's not appropriate for an inquisitorial process. That happens in a trial. As a lawyer, I know that. And secondly, a suggestion that witnesses should be compellable. Again, there's no legal basis for doing that in a non-statutory inquiry. So there is a restriction of what can be done in terms of the law.
First Minister, this is all about openness, transparency and accountability. You claim in your statement that the investigations are conducted at arm's length from you and your office, yet it is clear that you are having a significant involvement in the direction and remit of this inquiry. Surely this diminishes any integrity connected to this inquiry, given that you are included in this investigation and you are at the same time controlling the terms of reference. That cannot be right. And we've seen a succession of so-called independent inquiries relating to your government, and we've seen time and time again your government seeking to protect the government from criticism at all costs. So therefore, how can you reassure the Welsh people that this is not just another inquiry that ultimately leads to accusations of a Welsh government cover-up?
Well, first of all, he has no evidence at all to back up what he has just said. The inquest, of course, will take place. That will take place at the end of November. That is the primary procedure in this process. Secondly, I've not interfered with the protocol at all. It's been in the hands of the Permanent Secretary. I've set the terms of reference. That is true. And it is the case that, well, if it is the case that that's right, then the court will say so. The reality is that I did not have to set up this investigation. I didn't have to set it up. There was no legal responsibility on me to do it. I did it in terms of transparency. The QC was agreed. by the family. The protocol was agreed by the family at the time, and the QC is fully independent, under no pressure from government, and the QC is in a position to ask whatever questions he wants of me as a witness. And that is a fundamental principle of independence that is preserved as part of the investigation.
Or independent?
Arweinydd grŵp UKIP Gareth Bennett.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, I note that the Welsh Government has been developing its intention to turn Wales into a nation of sanctuary for refugees and asylum seekers. Is this a major priority for your government?
Well, can I welcome the member to, as the latest leader of UKIP in this chamber. I have absolutely no idea why he has such a problem with refugees. We have a proud record of giving sanctuary to people who have been persecuted around the world. Children, particularly, who have seen things that he has never seen. He has never seen. Adults who have seen people killed in front of them, people who have seen war, people who have been the subject of persecution, sometimes of genocide. And there he is saying that somehow a nation of sanctuary is not something we should pursue.
Actually, I asked you a question. I didn't make any assertion, but I thank you for your reflections. It does sound from your answer, First Minister, that this is going to be a major priority for your government, so that's very interesting. As you may recall, I was the only member of the Assembly's Communities Committee who opposed the nation of sanctuary idea. Now I have made an assertion. I thought that we should be looking after our own people first. Obviously, a strange idea to many people in this chamber. There are massive problems of housing, destitution and access to mental health provision in Wales already. Before you agree to encourage another very needy group of people to come here in greater and greater numbers, which is what you are doing with your nation of sanctuary status. Now, when I raised this issue a year ago, the Welsh Government didn't... When I raised this issue a year ago, the Welsh Government didn't like what I had to say. I did get a lot of support from the general public. I had a whole load of supportive emails on this point. So your government may not be in sync with the opinions of the people of Wales on this point. Another issue where you may once again be dangerously out of touch is on the issue of the burqa. Now, I commented on the burqa issue recently because I was asked to by members of the media, and you didn't like what I had to say. Now, do you think that this whole issue of the burqa is taboo and that nobody has the right to comment on this?
Well, is it right that a man should tell a woman what to wear? He thinks so. He thinks so. It's typical of his position. And what on earth does what people wear have to do with politics? We are a free country. It is a very un-British thing to say that people do not have the right to wear a particular item of clothing. That belongs in a previous time in a previous country, if I can put it that way. Let me remind him that each and every one of us in this chamber is the descendant of an immigrant. Each and every one of us. It's all a question of when our families originally came. This country is a country of immigrants. There were no people here. People arrived here from elsewhere. The Welsh language has its roots in Sanskrit. That's how far the Welsh language has travelled over many, many millennia. I do not see why offering sanctuary to a very small number of people should be taboo for him. He talks about services like mental health services. Many of them are delivered by immigrants. We would not have a national health service if we didn't recruit doctors from abroad. And I have to say, given the tone of what we've heard in this chamber this afternoon, the question must be asked as to what the difference is between UKIP and the BNP.
The problem you have, First Minister, is that once again you are completely out of touch with your own people.
Four members.
Sky News conducted a recent poll which indicated that 60% of the British people support a ban on the burqa. So let's just summarise your position here. You've said publicly that my comments on this were racist, yet 60% of the public appear to agree with me. By implication, you appear to believe that 60% of the British people are racists. Going forward, how does your Labour government expect to be re-elected if it goes around telling its 60% of its own voters that they are racists?
4 members and dropping 29. There's the answer to you in terms of popularity, and that's the answer to you in terms of where we sit in terms of public support. You start with the Muslims, then you move on to Jewish people. You know, the Orthodox Jews dress in a strange way. We can't have that. Then you move on to people who wear skull caps. You know, why should they dress in a different way? Then you move on to other sections of the population, people perhaps who are Christians, who are members of particular churches, who dress in a particular way. This stops now. This stops now. Nobody has the right to tell anybody else in Britain, in Wales, a free country, how they dress. If that's the way that UKIP is going, then it's going down some very, very dark alleyways indeed. It's going down the alleyway of racism, and that's one which all of us in this chamber, apart from the famous 4 over there, will certainly object to and fight.
Arweinydd Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
I'd just like to say that I'm proud to lead a party that stands up for every single citizen in Wales, regardless of where they were born, and we stand against everything that was just said by the leader of the far right. First Minister, a lack of ambition, taking the easy way out, and a matter of fairness were all phrases used to describe your government's refusal to introduce universal free school dinners for infants. Those are words from your current Cabinet Secretary for Education. You now plan to restrict the number of eligible children even further. Do you think that it can be described as a matter of fairness that if your household has a net earned income of £7,401, the Welsh Government will cut your free school meal support?
Well, first of all, a consultation has just ended on this. I don't know whether she put submissions into that consultation, but we will look at the responses of that consultation and develop policy accordingly.
First Minister, your poverty of ambition is exacerbating the poverty of our pupils. You are instituting a policy here that is harsher than the Tory Westminster government's. Just 1 year after a prominent promise on page 38 of the Labour manifesto, which read, "We will introduce free school meals for all primary school children," you are about to break that promise. First Minister, the Welsh Government received £15 million extra in funding due to the introduction of free school meals in England, and this has funded the Schools Challenge Cymru scheme, the scheme which closed in July of 2017. So can you tell us, what is this extra £15 million now going to be spent on?
Well, the reality is it wasn't really extra money. We were already, of course, providing free school breakfast. So we were already providing free school meals in our schools. That was something that we'd funded ourselves. Now, we got that consequential. That money, along with any other consequentials that arrive, will form part of the budget and its development over the course of the next few months. But I have to say that if we look at our education system, we see schools being built all across Wales. I saw 2 only last week. So good results at A-level, good results at GCSE, the development of an all-Wales curriculum. I don't believe that we're letting our children down at all. We're seeing more investment now than ever, and the education system is going from strength to strength.
I'm asking you about food in children's mouths, not about school buildings. Now, the take-up of free breakfasts remains low, and experts from the Bevan Foundation and the Children's Society and the Food Foundation have all highlighted the need for universal free school meals. Free school breakfasts do not preclude the Welsh Government from offering free school meals. Now, First Minister, the Children, Young Person and Education Committee confirmed that you have taken £15 million from educational investment. You're snatching money away from children's futures, and soon you will be snatching away their school dinners as well. Of course, the chaos of universal credit and the effect of austerity is going to make life harder for families right across Wales. 55,000 children living in poverty will not be eligible for free school meals under your proposals. That's more stigma, more hunger, more food banks. If enacted, the Labour Liberal Democrats will have imposed the most regressive free school meal policy in the whole of the UK. And that is a point that has been made by the Bevan Foundation, who, along with the Children's Society, are calling for you all to think again. First Minister, do you agree with the experts? Free school meals deliver better health, welfare and educational outcomes. Or do you believe that this investment in our children isn't worth it?
Well, I mean, the Leader of Plaid Cymru seems to think that we don't have free school meals in Wales. We do. We have free school breakfasts. That point is glossed over. Secondly, we are providing an extra £10 million a year between 2019-20 to 22-23, providing free school meals. That's despite having no additional funding from the UK government. The reality is, and she points out, as she's done before, the general election manifesto for the Labour Party, of course we'd like to be more generous, but we need to see the election of a Labour government in London in order for that to happen. The reality is she couldn't be more generous. Plaid Cymru haven't got more money hidden in a stash somewhere. We need to see a government across the whole of the UK that's committed to fairness, committed to social justice and committed to opportunity as we are here in Wales.
What is the Welsh Government doing to improve economic links between Wales and South West England?
Our investment in transport connectivity, together with the Economic Action Plan, demonstrates our commitment to more cross-border working and growing the economic links with our neighbours.
Thank the First Minister for his response. Last week I chaired a Wales policy forum in Newport on building the Western powerhouse, and I was surprised to listen to quite a lot of negative commentary from particularly the Plaid Cymru benches about this. And yesterday, I think a Plaid economist said it was an attack on the integrity of Wales. Will the First Minister for the Welsh Government confirm that he supports our working more closely with the West of England, and in particular with Mervyn Rees and with Tim Bowles, the two directly elected mayors we have there? And will he ensure that the Welsh Government, to the extent it has powers as well as the Cardiff City region, that it will work with those directly elected mayors and with the UK Government to do everything possible to ensure we get the best benefit we can from the abolition of the tolls and the strength of the economy over the Severn to link in with us here in South Wales?
Well, there is no difficulty with working cross-border. Everyone else does it. If we say we're not going to work across the border, it's a sign of an inferiority complex. And so we are more than happy to work not just with colleagues in England, but in Ireland as well, and indeed our European partners who are incredibly important to us. We are an internationalist government that we look out, and that means looking beyond Wales's borders in every way. What this can't be, though, is a power grab by the UK government to set up some kind of cross-border body that escapes the control of the Welsh Government. That we will not put up with. One of the problems is, of course, that there's no equivalent level of government in England that we can talk to. In reality, it's only the UK government. The mayors don't have the powers that we have got, and it's a shame for people in England. And we saw this, so there was a great opportunity for us when the regional development agencies went, all our competition disappeared. It was great news for us. It was not good news for the English regions. So yes, of course, we will work with partners outside Wales, but there has to be a defined way of doing that that doesn't impinge on the powers and responsibilities of the government and the Assembly.
Lee Waters.
It's just now becoming clearer the impact of reducing the tolls on the Severn Bridge will increase traffic by around 20% as driving becomes a cheaper and more attractive alternative to public transport, as well as the impact on property prices around South East Wales from the measure. What assessment has the First Minister made of the new public transport and active travel measures outlined in the report published last week by the Future Generations Commissioner?
Well, I mean, first of all, I have to take the decision as to whether the black route should proceed. I always look at alternatives. Some of them are not clear from the report as to how they'd actually operate in practice. But as a government, of course, we've been very, very committed to investment in public transport. We see that, of course, through the rail network and the substantial investment that will be put into the South Wales Metro and other parts of Wales over the next few years.
Adam Price.
The First Minister is right, of course. There is a broader political purpose at work here in creating these two vast conurbations, Mersey Dee in the north, Sevenside in the south, straddling the Welsh border like a colossus. They're there to reintegrate Wales into England's political economy. But this has been part of your government's agenda as well. And can the First Minister honestly say that turning Newport into a commuter suburb of Greater Bristol does anything anything positive for people on lower average wages in Newport. And instead of this obsession with cross-border linkages and cross-border connectivity, how about some connectivity within Wales? How about actually having a transport links in Wales so that actually try and get from the south to the north of our country isn't like an odyssey of classical proportions?
Well, I don't think building an economic Berlin Wall is the answer, if I'm honest. The reality is that the economic and commercial flows go from west to east. That doesn't have to interfere with their identity. That's something that we should be proud of. That doesn't mean it's a threat to Wales. If we see it that way, we're victims of our own inferiority complex. There are much better links to the north than there ever were. We got a flight twice a day. The trains run every 2 hours. When I came here in '99, there was no train going north at all. There was no direct train. That has improved. We've seen incremental improvements on the A470 as well. But you know, a road is not the answer as far as the north to the south is concerned. But really, you know, not even the Unionists of Northern Ireland would say we don't want to work with the Republic. They see the value of cross-border working. They don't see it particularly as a threat to themselves. We should embrace it, control it, embrace it, and make sure it works in favour of our own people.
Edward David Rees.
What action is the Welsh Government taking to improve air quality in and around Port Talbot?
Well, a tailored programme of work is underway to independently review the Clean Air Action Plan for Port Talbot and to develop a future plan of work to further improve air quality in the region. Additionally, officials, I think, held a meeting this morning with NRW and with the Port Talbot Council.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. I'm sure that there are many issues you are taking on board, but the real monitoring of air quality is being focused upon PM10s and PM2.5s. Understandable, because they're the ones which are recognised to be the most effective on impact on people's health. But we have seen a large increase in the what is known as nuisance dust fallout from the Port Talbot steelworks across the whole Port Talbot area. Now, I recognise that this perhaps is not considered a health issue, but it is definitely a health issue. People are breathing this in. They are walking it through their houses. They have got it on their cars, their properties. It is a real problem for many of my constituents. Now, there's also no doubt that this comes from the Tata Steelworks. And I've had discussions with the management of Tata to look at what they're doing about this. And there are plans for longer-term problems to be resolved through improving the environment. But there's a shortage issue, a short-term issue about doing it now. What can we do about the production processes to ensure that this fallout is reduced and limited as best we can? Will you as a government actually look at the ways you can work with Tata to look at the long-term solutions? And just remind you, the state aid of the EU doesn't affect environmental options, so it's a possibility of looking at those longer-term solutions. But can you also have discussions with Tata to look at how they can be a responsible neighbour to ensure that the fallouts we are experiencing in Port Talbot are reduced, so we don't get a situation where every morning people wake up to either black or red dust on their gardens, on their cars, on their windowsills, and have to look at that every single day. This has gone on and it's unacceptable. We need now action to ensure Tata take the responsibility seriously.
Well, I know that NRW regulates the steelworks in accordance with a permit issued under the environmental permitting regime. We, of course, have our commitment to improving and proactively tackling poor air quality in the area. In April, the Minister of Environment set up plans to re-examine the action plan, the approach it takes and the evidence that underpins it. And I understand the Minister will be meeting with Tata, with our NRW and with the Port Talbot Council soon to support that process.
Susie Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, it's been just over 6 months now since the 50-mile-an-hour zone on the M4 was extended between Port Talbot and the Earlswood turning for Swansea. At the time, your Minister telling us that this was in advance of a completed detailed modelling which would be taking place in the summer. Well, summer's over. Can you tell us what those 3 months have produced in terms of data, whether the detailed modelling has actually been completed, and in particular whether any of the traffic has been diverted to the distributor road? Thank you.
We will be, that data is being analysed at the moment. The output will be published so the members and the public can see it, and that will be done as soon as possible.
Di Lloyd.
So with First Minister, obviously, as well as industry, as we've heard, it's clear that transport-related pollution from the M4 and local roads add to the air quality challenges in Port Talbot. Now, the Swansea Bay and Western Valleys Metro could significantly reduce the number of cars on the roads, but clearly this requires funding. Therefore, what discussions has your government had with the UK government and Network Rail since the publication of Professor Barry's Case for Investment report in July? And how confident are you currently that the UK Government will listen to requests for fair rail funding for Wales, being as we've never had fair rail funding in Wales?
Well, you asked me, am I optimistic about fair rail funding? The honest answer is no, because history tells us otherwise. We've received 1.1% of the investment in infrastructure, despite the fact that our population share should be far, far higher. That's England and Wales, of course, not without Scotland as well. In terms of Swansea, much of Swansea's rail network, of course, was taken up in the 60s, so much of the solution will lie in non-heavy rail options. Discussions are ongoing between officials and indeed with the Minister, with, for example, local authorities and, of course, the authorities that are dealing with the city deal. And what is hugely important, of course, is to make sure that all communities are properly served. I know that there was a suggestion at one point that Neath would no longer be in the main line. That was never true. I can give people that absolute assurance. It's that is absolutely clear. So we need to make sure that we are able to connect more communities via a number of modes of transport in the Swansea Bay area.
Cwestiwn 5, Steffan Lewis.
Yes, first of all, well, there are three things that I can refer to. First of all, we are keeping a very close eye on what legislation might be needed and the timing of any such legislation in advance of Brexit. Secondly, we're working on, for example, providing support through our £50 million EU Transition Fund, and we will launch a new business portal shortly, and on top of that, expanding our overseas operations to protect existing markets. We will also be recruiting more officials. Thousands have been recruited in Whitehall. We can't reach that level, but we are looking to recruit an extra 198 members of staff in order to deal with what is the most important issue that we've faced in the last 20 years. And indeed, it's 21 years ago today that the referendum took place.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. And of course, crucial to preparations for leaving the European Union will be future migration policy. Today, the Migration Advisory Committee has published a report and they say that EU migrants paid more in tax than they took in benefits, contributed more to the NHS workforce than the healthcare they accessed, and they had no effect on crime rates. Sadly, of course, the latest migration figures show that net migration from the EU is at its lowest level since 2012. As the First Minister stated yesterday in front of the External Affairs Committee, we have effectively full employment in Wales, but growing demands on public services and, of course, labour needs in the wider economy. So, as the Tories pull up the drawbridge on Fantasy Island, Britain, is the First Minister any closer to progressing the suggestion for a Welsh work permit system?
Well, as he will know, I've not been opposed in principle to such a system. There have been no further discussions on it since it was last raised by David Davis with me. I think today is a timely opportunity to look at that once again. But I don't agree with the findings of that report. I mean, everybody says we need to attract professionals. No one disagrees with that. But the reality is we need to attract people in many areas of the economy. And the reality, if we look at food processing, if we look at our abattoirs, which is not everyone's cup of tea in terms of somewhere to work, huge numbers, if not the majority of the workers in those industries, are actually from other countries. If they weren't able to come here, those abattoirs would close and local people who work there would lose their jobs. And that is something that's often overlooked. It's not a question of, well, let's just get the most highly skilled people. We need the people that the economy needs in order for the economy not just to prosper, but to function.
Darren Miller.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, would you agree with me that Wales needs to take advantage of the opportunities presented by Brexit, as well as dealing with the potential adverse consequences? One of those opportunities, in addition to the overseas trade opportunities, which you've already identified, to be fair, as a government, and you've invested in your overseas offices, is changes to the procurement processes that the government might use in Wales. Now, clearly, the EU regulations at the moment cause significant problems, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses, very often who want to do business with the public sector. What is your government doing to look at the procurement processes that are at large here in Wales, in the public sector, in order to take advantage of the opportunities of leaving the EU?
Well, can I thank the member for his praise for the overseas offices that in previous years were roundly criticised for opening, but I welcome the conversion Well, the National Procurement Service has for some years now provided an excellent service for businesses to take advantage of procurement opportunities. We've seen, for example, the amount of locally procured services increase both in local government and in terms of what we actually procure. And yes, we have to be prepared for what Brexit might throw at us. But 2 years on, I can't see exactly what the advantages of Brexit are. I don't see any trade deals on the table. I don't see any opportunities for Welsh exporters that would replace the barriers that we put up to the European market. So let's hope that in November there is a deal that's reasonable, a deal that is agreed, and a deal, importantly, that works for Welsh workers.
Jane Hutt.
First Minister, do you agree with TUC General Secretary Francis O'Grady, who said last week that workers' rights and employment protection are at risk under Brexit and the alarming prospect of a no-deal? Do you agree that a no-deal would be disastrous for workers in Wales?
Well, of course, the deception is, of course, that 2 years ago at the time of the referendum, nobody said, even those staunch leavers, of course there'll be no deal. No one said that. Everyone said, of course there'll be a deal. The EU will fall over itself to give us a deal. The German car manufacturers will ride to our rescue, and I met with some of them a fortnight ago, and they're not going to do that, will ride to our rescue and force the hand of the German government and therefore the European Union. It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. And this is what we all feared at the time 2 years ago. If we cannot strike a deal with our closest, biggest market that we already have substantial regulatory alignment with, we've got no chance of doing it with anyone else. No chance. You know, people talk about a free trade deal with New Zealand. Well, fine. But New Zealand's a market of only 4.8 million people, and it's 12,000 miles away. It's never going to replace the European market of 450 million, with whom we have a land border. And that's sometimes overlooked. So yes, you know, by all means, look at other free trade agreements, but the reality is, unless we get our relationship with Europe right, nothing else will work.
Question 6, Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister provide an update on what action the Welsh Government is taking to improve cancer survival rates?
Well, our approach to improving cancer survival is set out in the Cancer Delivery Plan for Wales. That includes specific focus on detecting cancer early, timely access to treatment, and the delivery of high-quality care.
Thank you. First Minister, the key to improving cancer survival rates of Wales cancer patients is early diagnosis. I have been contacted by a GP expressing concern over the number of cancer referrals that get routinely downgraded by a consultant. The GP who raised this issue with me believes, as I do, that the GP should be informed of this decision so that they can challenge the decision. A GP knows their patient far better than a consultant who has never seen the patient. And while the consultant might have specialist knowledge about cancer, the GP has specialist knowledge about the patient. So, First Minister, will you make it a mandatory requirement that GPs are informed of any decisions to downgrade a cancer referral?
Well, I'm reluctant to step into the breach of an into the place of an oncologist in terms of what that oncologist might think. I would assume it would be good practice anyway for a GP to be informed of progress with regard to a patient. Now, people have different tumours, they react in different ways to different cancers. We know that, which is why in the future it's gene therapy that carries the spark of great hope for many, many people. But I'm surprised to hear about the example, and if she wants to share more information with me, then I'd be glad to look at that. But I would think it would be good practice for the flow of information to be two-way.
Angela Burns. First Minister, for a number of years now, I have used First Minister's questions to ask you to address when your government plans to meet its cancer waiting time targets. And you have, to be fair, given me regular assurances that it will happen in the very near future. But the latest figures for June 2018 show that the target for patients referred via the urgent route is being missed by close to 10%. It is clear that one of the barriers to meeting these targets is poor workforce planning for the diagnostic roles. What assurances can you provide that the newly created HEIW will focus on more effective workforce planning? And as your tenure as First Minister nears to its end, can I ask one final time, when does your government aim to meet its cancer waiting time targets?
Well, what I can say is that we have the highest survival rates yet reported, and that surely is something that we should welcome. 72.7% of those diagnosed between 2005 to 9 and 2010 to 14 survived at least 1 year. 57.1% are expected to survive at least 5 years. And premature death caused by cancer has fallen by around 10% in the past decade. I mean, those figures speak for themselves in terms of what has happened with cancer delivery. The number of well, she talks of targets. That's a fair question, but the answer I give is look at the results. The reality is that there are more and more people who are not just being cured, in other words, 5 years free of cancer, but are also living with cancer in a way that was impossible 10 or 15 years ago. And I think that is something for us to celebrate. Yes, of course, we want to make sure that more people are seen as quickly as possible. 85.9% of people newly diagnosed with cancer via the urgent route started definitive treatment within the target time in June, and 97.4% of those not via the urgent route. But we can see from the survival rates that things are moving in the right direction.
Rhina Piorwerth.
Diolch. Mi oedd na stori yn y wasg ddoe yn digwydd bod am glaf oedd wedi goroesi cancer, ond oedd wedi dod o hyd i dyfiant newydd. Mi wnaed cais am brawf pet, a mi wrthodwyd hynny, wan di'r rheswm ddim wedi rhoi pam i fod wedi cael ei wrthod, ond yn ôl Cyngor Iechyd Cymuned y Gogledd, mae'n llawer haws cael mynediad at brofion pet mewn rhai ardaloedd nac ardaloedd eraill. Mae yna anghysondeb. Rwan, gan yn bod ni'n gwybod bod diagnosis cynnar yn yrwr allweddol pan mae'n dod at oroesi cancer. Oni dydy hi'n amlwg bod rhaid cael yn gyntaf mynediad mor gyflym a phosib yn enwedig i bobl sydd wedi cael cancer a wedi goroesi yn y gorffennol, ond hefyd i bod hi'n amlwg bod yna anghysondeb, fel y gwelson ni efo profion MRI yn ddiweddar. A wnewch chi gyfaddau bod y diffyg cysondeb yna yn golygu bod rhai pobl mewn rhai rhannol Gymru a llai o siawns o oroesi cancer na pobl eraill?
Na, dwi'n gwybod yn derbyn bod yna ddiffyg cysondeb. Ni'n gwybod bod scanners ar gap. Mae un yn Nghaerdydd a un yn Wrecsam. Ni'n gwybod bod y system ddim yn cael reoli ynglyn â'r ffaith, ddim yn cael ei reoli ynglyn â faint o capacity sydd. So mae yna capacity yn y system. Anodd iawn, wrth gwrs, i wybod y reswm, pan mae unigolyn wedi cael yr ateb yna, ond does dim tystiolaeth i ddangos bod bobl yn y gogledd enghraifft mewn sefyllfa gwath nag yn y de. Ond heb o bod y manylion, wrth gwrs, mae'n anodd i roi i siarad mwy amdano fe.
Cwestiwn 7, Nick Ramsey.
What is the Welsh Government's vision for the future of financial support for the agricultural industry?
Well, the first thing we'd like is a commitment from the UK Government to provide the money post-2022, because that's not been done yet. We've made a suggestion that the UK Treasury should make that money available, that a pot of money equivalent to the pot of money available for the UK from the EU at the moment should be set to one side and the money distributed in the same way as it is now, unless and until there's agreement across the UK administrations to change the system. Now, on the basis that we will have the money that we were promised, we have, of course, set out our vision in Brexit and Our Land, our consultation document, and our new land management programme comprising an economic resilience scheme and a public goods scheme will provide support to enhance the benefits that the people of Wales receive from the land.
Well, First Minister, unfortunately, you can't lay all of the world's ills at the door of the UK Government, much as you might like to. And, of course, when the Welsh Government does get money, there are numbers of developed areas, such as farming, where it is your responsibility to make sure that adequate funding is there. You'll be well aware of the deep concerns of farmers, certainly farmers I met over the summer at various shows across my constituency, who are very concerned at the current consultation into plans to change the direct payment system. Now, whilst we all accept that there is a consultation there, why is it the case that that consultation did not include an option to retain the current direct payments, albeit in a modified form? Is it not the case that this is not the time to use Brexit as a cover to change the current system, because you wanted to change it all along to squeeze money out of the farming budget and put it elsewhere? This is too much and it's too complex at this point in time.
Well, the farming budget is in effect ring-fenced. So money can't be taken out of farming subsidies and put elsewhere anyway. The £260 million that comes into farming subsidies in Wales is not spent anywhere else. It has to be spent on farming. And to my mind, that will be a good system for the future. I don't think farmers want to find themselves in a situation where they're competing with education and health for funding. And they've all told me that anyway. Secondly, the last thing we want is to be funded on the basis of Barnett when it comes to farming. That would be an enormous cut in funding as far as Wales is concerned. So to brush to one side the issue of the money as if it was a minor inconvenience is simply wrong, because we know that without the money, there is no money for farming, there is no money for farming subsidies, and the promise that was made is breached straight away. There is a consultation, of course, that has taken place. We'll take cognizance of what is said in that consultation, but the bottom line is to look at ways of making Welsh farming more sustainable in the future, and that is something that we will always strive to do.
Ac yn ola, cwestiwn 8, Hefin David.
Will the First Minister make a statement about Welsh Government plans to deal with the problem of SA mills?
I'm concerned about the findings of a study by Swansea University which shows an increase in the use of SA mills. New guidelines have been issued by the Quality Assurance Agency, and we will continue to work with partners to consider what further steps can be taken.
Just about an hour ago, I visited editmygrammar.co.uk, which is a website that says it offers secure and trusted help for academics. And posing as a first-year undergraduate, I had an online chat with a chap called Frank McAllister, who described himself as a senior academic advisor. And the chat went like this. I asked him, do you write essays? He said, yes, we can surely have your essay complete for you. I said, will I get caught cheating? He said, no, you will never, ever, unless you tell anybody yourself. So I'm telling you all now. Will you? And then I asked, will you write the whole thing for me? And Frank McAllister said, yes. And I said, how much? And he said, the original cost of the essay was 250 quid, but we're running a promotional discount and you can have it for £120. And for that, you get contact with the writer. It's the start of a new academic term, and you've identified, First Minister, the Swansea University study that said 1 in 7 admit paying for their essays. Other countries have brought about legislation. Do you think a UK-wide legislation would be appropriate, and will you contact and liaise with the UK government to do that?
Well, firstly, could I suggest to the member that he has a budding career as a private investigator? If this doesn't work out for him, which I'm sure it will. And secondly, he raises an important issue, and where he's get the money from, I don't know. But plagiarism has been an issue in higher education for as long as higher education has been there, but it's got worse. There's no question about that. He asked the question, UK-wide legislation. I'm open to that idea. I think it has to be UK-wide. I don't think it would work just in Wales. I'm open to that idea. I think universities, of course, need to take their own steps first to see if that works first, and they are, in fairness. There are a number of checks that are put in place by universities. But if that does not work in the long term, then for the integrity of the higher education system, legislation may then be needed. It's an enormous risk for students. If you're caught doing this, it's not just plagiarism, it's an admission of dishonesty, and you will carry that around for the rest of your life. So there's a huge risk for students, but if the universities feel, I suppose it's primarily a matter for them, if the universities feel that this is an issue that is beyond their control, then the legislative option may then emerge.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog. Yr eitem nesaf felly yw'r datganiad a chyhoeddiad.